Welcome to Not2 Reads, an audio library of revolutionary texts. Scripting the Change. Selected writings of Anuradha Ghandy. Practical Socialism. Not socialism, but pure fascism. The word socialism has become a cliché in Indian politics. Any Tom, Dick, or Harry uses the word. Any political party, irrespective of whether it is a reactionary party or progressive, must include this word in its manifesto, interpreting it to its own convenience. Hence, we have the Nehruvian socialism of the Congress I and the Gandhian socialism referred to by the BJP. And now, Thackeray and Pei Sangare have also jumped onto this bandwagon with their own special brand, Practical Socialism. The articles recently published by the editor of Novakal, Lilanta Kadilkar, based on his short visit to Soviet Russia, propound this new theory. A mere fortnight's stay and paltry information were enough for Thackeray, Sangare, and Kadilkar to develop these theories. Although this series of articles by Kadilkar is informative, readable, and has a way of riveting the attention of the reader to its contents, it is quite superficial. On closer reading, we can easily perceive the skin-deep knowledge of the writer about the USSR marching towards its goals in the last 30 years, and about Marxism or socialism itself. The articles are, moreover, a reflection of the ignorance and poor knowledge of many of our journalists on political theory and international politics. Kadilkar candidly accepts that prior to his visit to Russia in 1983, his views about that country were based upon popular misconceptions. Thackeray and Sangare are even more superficial in their study. For them, Thackeray and Sangare are even more superficial in their study. For them, these articles suffice to develop a theory of practical socialism. One does not know whether to applaud or to moan when Kadilkar announces that his is one of the first such articles to be written on the Soviet Union. In contrast, Mr. Banerjee, chief of the Geological Survey of India, remarked after his 2-month visit to China that his stay was far too short to observe the variety and development in Chinese life, and that was, in fact, his second visit. Kadilkar, on the basis of his 15-day sojourn, appreciates Russia for its practical application of socialism and the rejection of dogmatic Marxism. He is happy that they have rejected the non-practical, idealistic theorization of Marxism. Moreover, Kadilkar is mightily pleased that Russia has crushed the nuisance of Christianity and Islam. Side by side, he has the audacity to say how socialism and Hinduism can coexist. What a formidable task it would be to explain to Kadilkar the journey through which socialism in Russia has traversed, turning it from a socialist state into a social imperialist dictatorship, and at the same time, to make the reader aware of the reactionary motives behind Kadilkar's writings. Saying that the writings of Marx are only fit for a library, and that they reflect the dreaminess of a poet, Kadilkar praises Lenin and Mao for developing practical socialism. Little does he realize that he is torpedoing the theoretical developments of Lenin and Mao on Marxism by saying this. He seems oblivious to the history that, in 1917, Lenin had to struggle against the outdated and dogmatic tendencies in Marxism, only to further the cause of the proletarian revolution, to execute the ideology of Marxism itself. In 1917, in the introduction to his famous work, The State and Revolution, Lenin wrote about how the present undesirable and misguided tendencies in the socialist movement were quite acceptable to the capitalists. Whose side was Lenin on then, the revolutionary Marxists or practical socialism? Indian democracy is a sham, and although India needs socialism, it needs a genuine democratic society first, where democracy would be real for the toiling people in the oppressed sections. To establish such a society is the responsibility of the revolutionary communists. To bring about such a society, there is need for a revolution, a class war, since the ruling classes will not yield their power peacefully, and Marxism has to be the ideological tool for this. How can India develop unless the parasitic ruling class, which has fattened on the exploitation of the working people, is overthrown by waging a continuous battle against it? Those who like to conveniently ignore the aspect of class struggle and its consequence, violence, while talking about socialism, are only playing with words. They have not understood the essence of revolutionary socialism. Words like practical and feasible are not new to the international socialist movement. Whenever the socialist movement advances in a country, its organizers are cautioned to be practical and not too militant. These observers should note that the ruling classes are highly organized and powerful. It is impossible to uproot them, to finish them off politically, without a class struggle and armed conflict. This moderate stream of thought has always been flowing along the revolutionary struggles. For instance, in the trade union movement, it says, "Be practical, aim only for that much which the workers are prepared." In the student movement, students have no interest in politics, talk only of their demands. In short, being practical always means lagging behind the consciousness of the people and not exerting to take it forward towards the resolution of class conflict, to prefer the easier path of participating in the elections and, thus, betraying the revolution. In Russia itself, the professing of practical socialism by Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and now Chernikov, or Andropov, amounts to a betrayal of the revolution brought about by Lenin and Stalin and of the sacrifices made by thousands of Russians earlier. In October 1917, the Russian working class toppled the capitalists and laid the foundations of a new society based on socialism. The workers came to power by making great sacrifices. They defeated European aggression. They thus created an industrially strong and capable Russia. To the exploited people of the world, Russia became a pathfinder and a beacon light. It was only through a deep study of Marxist theory and its correct application that the workers came to power in Russia. But in 1952, after the demise of Stalin, the leadership adopted shortcuts in order to face various economic and political issues, and thereby promoted the growth of capitalistic tendencies. Due to their own self-interests, they let the power in the economic and political fields slip into the hands of the bureaucracy and the technocrats. As a result, a new class of exploiters emerged. Thus, by 1965, the first socialist state became a capitalist regime. Now, it has become an imperialist power. A more realistic assessment has been done by clear-sighted visitors, unlike Kadilkar, who have noticed how higher-level officers and managers possess a number of cars personally. Brezhnev himself owns 9 cars, including a Rolls-Royce. They own private rest houses at holiday resorts and a lot of property which they have amassed through corrupt means and by abusing their official positions. Hence, now in Russia, there exists a huge gap between the rich and the poor, which is bound to increase day by day. The average Russian worker has to stand in long queues for bread, while the ministers roll in wealth. Prostitution is on the increase, and alcoholism is becoming a big problem. Kadilkar was also impressed by a few other things he saw during his visit. A beautiful cemetery in Leningrad for the soldiers, incentives for the highly intelligent students, special positions being given to scientists and musicians, etc. But this is nothing new, and can be seen in most European capitalist countries. Kadilkar has also been impressed by the facilities for entertainment and health for workers, but these have been provided since about 40 years ago, when Russia was a socialist country. The present exploitative ruling class is simply continuing with them, because withdrawing these facilities would lead to vehement protests from the people. But what Kadilkar liked most about the present-day Russia, in which he wants to be implemented in India, are discipline and dictatorship. It is here that Kadilkar appears in his true colors. However, it must be noted that the dictatorship imposed in Russia today is that of the new capitalist class, and not the dictatorship previously imposed by the working class on the capitalist class. The present discipline is a dictatorship forced upon the common people to prevent them from speaking their minds and revolting against the new form of exploitation. To support this kind of a discipline is similar to the view held during the emergency in 1975-77 by a section of the middle and upper classes, that since trains ran on time and roughnecks were to be seen less on the streets, thus dictatorship was good. The reality, however, was that strikes were banned, prices were rising, and wages were frozen. The assets of the Tatas and the Birlas were on an upward curve, the workers were getting poorer, and the situation was totally being neglected. It was then that the practical communists and the CPI were full of praise for the emergency, and now Kadilkar is following suit. Kadilkar feels a great sense of relief that in Russia, since religion is a private affair, there is a curbing of Islam. This, he feels, is beneficial for India, because otherwise, through Uzbekistan and other parts of Asia, Islamic forces, the descendants of Tamerlane and Babur, would swoop upon the soft and culturally rich Hindu people of India and swallow them. Little does he realize that the Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty has placed India in the Russian noose forever. Kadilkar, who believes that Islam is more cruel than Hinduism and Christianity, should really ask the Dalits if they find the caste-based, discriminatory Hinduism any more tolerant. It is clear that those who talk of practical socialism make a pretense of liberalism and their sympathy for the working class. In reality, they're creating a social base for the Hindutva chauvinistic philosophy in the country. This is reminiscent of the manner in which Hitler tried to break the socialist mass base and create his fascist dictatorship under the guise of nationalistic socialism and an anti-Jew campaign. In a similar vein, Kadilkar and others are trying to establish a Bharatya brand of dictatorship under the guise of practical socialism. If some sections of the CPI-CPM, the followers of Dange, feel that there is some substance in what Kadilkar is saying, it only indicates the low level that they have descended to. Kadilkar is talking of nothing but Hindutva chauvinistic dictatorship behind the veil of practical socialism.